My name is Marcus, and for 12 years I was the enforcer for the Inglewood family Bloods, the man they called when someone needed to be disciplined, when rules were broken, when respect had to be restored through pain. What I'm about to tell you will shake you to your core because it's not just about gang violence. It's about what happens when you become the person your own brothers fear more than their enemies. I was responsible for maintaining order within our set, which meant I hurt more of my own people than I ever hurt rival gang members. The job that was supposed to make me respected made me the most hated man in my own crew. But the night that changed everything wasn't when I had to discipline an enemy. It was when I was ordered to hurt someone I loved more than my own life. If you think you know what loyalty means, if you think you understand the price of power within a gang, you're about to learn why sometimes the most dangerous person in your life is the one who's supposed to protect you. What I did that night still haunts me, and what happened afterward will shock you more than anything you've ever heard about gang life. Before we go deeper, let me be crystal clear about why I'm sharing this story. I'm not here to glorify violence or make myself sound tough. I'm here to warn you about what happens when you become a weapon for other people's agendas, when your loyalty becomes a tool for others to use against you. For 12 years, I was the enforcer for the Inglewood family Bloods, one of the most respected and feared blood sets in Los Angeles. My job was to handle internal discipline, members who stole from the set, who showed cowardice in battle, who violated the codes that kept our organization functioning. I thought I was serving justice, maintaining order, protecting the integrity of our brotherhood. I was wrong about everything. I wasn't a protector, I was a predator who preyed on my own people. I wasn't maintaining justice, I was enforcing the will of leaders who used fear to control their soldiers. I wasn't preserving brotherhood, I was destroying the very bonds that should have held us together. The respect I commanded was built on terror, and terror is not respect. It's just fear wearing a mask. Every person I hurt in the name of the set was someone's son, brother, father, friend. Every act of violence I committed in the name of discipline was really just brutality disguised as justice. I grew up in Inglewood during the 1980s, when crack cocaine was destroying black communities across Los Angeles, and gang membership offered one of the few paths to respect, protection, and financial stability. My father was absent. My mother worked 2 jobs just to keep us housed and fed, and the streets were calling louder than anything else in my life. The Inglewood family Bloods weren't just a gang in our neighborhood. They were the law, the government, the social services, and the protection all rolled into one organization. They settled disputes, provided security, offered employment opportunities, and most importantly, they gave young men like me a sense of purpose and belonging that we couldn't find anywhere else. I joined when I was 15, went through the initiation, and spent the first few years learning the hierarchy, the codes, the complex social structure that governed our set. But I was different from most of the other young soldiers. I was bigger, stronger, and more willing to use violence than anyone else. The older members noticed this quickly, and by the time I was 18, they had identified me as potential enforcer material. They began training me for a role that would define the next 12 years of my life and destroy my soul in the process. The role of enforcer in a gang is unlike any other position in the organization. While soldiers fight enemies and leaders make strategic decisions, the enforcer's job is to police the behavior of your own people. When a member steals money from drug sales, the enforcer handles it. When someone shows cowardice during a conflict with rivals, the enforcer addresses it. When a soldier disrespects a superior or violates the codes that govern gang behavior, the enforcer ensures that consequences follow. The position requires a special kind of person, someone who can separate emotion from duty, someone who can hurt people they care about in service of abstract principles like loyalty and respect. I thought I was that kind of person. I thought I could handle the psychological burden of being feared by my own brothers. I was wrong on both counts. The job slowly ate away at my humanity, turning me into something I didn't recognize, something that even I was afraid of. But by the time I realized what I had become, I was trapped in a role that I couldn't escape without facing the same violence I had inflicted on others. The enforcer who wants to retire becomes the target of the next enforcer, and that cycle continues. until someone dies or gets out of the life entirely. My first assignment as an enforcer came when I was 19 years old. A young soldier named Kevin had been caught skimming money from drug sales, taking a little extra for himself instead of turning in the full amount to his superiors. In most legitimate organizations, this would be handled through warnings, probation, or termination. In the gang world, theft from the set is considered one of the most serious violations possible, a betrayal that undermines the trust and financial stability of the entire organization. The older members decided that Kevin needed to be taught a lesson that would deter others from similar behavior, and they chose me to deliver that lesson. I was given specific instructions: hurt him enough to send a message, but don't permanently disable him or kill him. The goal was correction, not elimination. I found Kevin at his apartment, explained why I was there, and then proceeded to beat him with a baseball bat until he was unconscious and bleeding. The sound of bones breaking, the sight of blood pooling on the floor, the way he begged for mercy before losing consciousness, all of it should have horrified me. Instead, I felt a sick sense of satisfaction, a feeling of power and importance that was intoxicating. I had become the instrument of the set's justice, the enforcer of its will, and that role felt more meaningful than anything I had ever done before. Over the next 12 years, I carried out hundreds of disciplinary actions against members of my own set. I broke bones, destroyed property, humiliated people in front of their families, and created a climate of fear that kept everyone in line. The leaders praised my work, telling me that I was essential to maintaining order and discipline within the organization. Other sets began to hear about the Inglewood family blood enforcer who never hesitated, never showed mercy, never failed to complete an assignment. My reputation grew beyond our own neighborhood, and I became known throughout the Blood Nation as someone who could handle the most difficult disciplinary problems. But with that reputation came a terrible isolation. Members of my own set were afraid to be around me, afraid that any mistake they made might result in a visit from the enforcer. I had no real friends within the organization, no one who trusted me enough to be vulnerable or honest. I was respected, feared, and completely alone. The brotherhood I had joined to find belonging had become a prison where I was both the guard and the most dangerous inmate. The power I wielded came at the cost of every meaningful relationship in my life, and I was too deep in the role to see a way out. The psychological toll of being an enforcer is something that no one prepares you for. Every act of violence you commit against your own people creates a little more distance between you and your humanity. You learn to shut off empathy, to ignore the pain you're causing, to focus on the abstract concept of justice rather than the concrete reality of suffering. But that emotional numbness doesn't stay contained to your work. It spreads into every aspect of your life. I stopped being able to form meaningful relationships, stopped feeling genuine emotions about anything, stopped caring about consequences or the future. I became a machine designed for violence, efficient and effective, but completely hollow inside. The drugs helped numb the guilt and the emptiness, but they also made me more unpredictable and dangerous. I started using cocaine to stay alert during long nights of enforcer work, then alcohol to come down from the stimulants, then stronger drugs to escape the memories of what I had done. The cycle of substance abuse made me even more isolated and paranoid, convinced that everyone around me was a potential threat or target. I was living in a constant state of hypervigilance, always ready for violence, never able to relax or trust anyone completely. The nature of enforcer work meant that I saw the worst aspects of gang life on a daily basis. I dealt with members who stole from their own brothers, who betrayed the set to law enforcement, who showed cowardice when courage was needed most. I saw how power corrupted the leaders, how they used their positions to exploit younger members, how they made decisions based on personal benefit rather than the good of the organization. I witnessed the hypocrisy of men who preached about loyalty and brotherhood while treating their soldiers as disposable assets. But I was complicit in all of it, enforcing rules that I knew were unjust, punishing people for violations that the leaders themselves committed regularly. The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming. I knew that what I was doing was wrong, but I had built my entire identity around being the enforcer, And admitting that the role was corrupt would mean admitting that I had wasted 12 years of my life hurting innocent people. So I kept doing the job, kept following orders, kept telling myself that I was serving a greater good, even as the evidence mounted, that I was just another tool of oppression in a system designed to exploit young black men. The assignments got progressively more difficult and morally questionable as the years went on. What started as disciplining thieves and cowards evolved into punishing people for minor infractions, personal disputes, and sometimes just because a leader wanted to send a message about their power. I was ordered to hurt people for talking back to superiors, for dating the wrong women, for failing to show proper respect in social situations. The line between justice and tyranny had completely disappeared, and I had become the instrument of a system that was more concerned with control than with right and wrong. But I was trapped in the role by my own reputation and the expectations of the organization. An enforcer who shows mercy is seen as weak, and weakness in that position is fatal. I had to maintain the image of ruthless efficiency, even when my conscience was screaming that what I was doing was wrong. The internal conflict was tearing me apart, but I couldn't see any way out that didn't involve my own destruction. I had become too valuable to the organization to be allowed to retire, and too dangerous to be allowed to live if I tried to leave. The breaking point came during my 12th year as enforcer, when I received an assignment that would test everything I thought I knew about loyalty and brotherhood. A young member named David had been accused of cooperating with law enforcement, providing information about the set's activities in exchange for leniency on his own charges. Cooperation with police is considered the ultimate betrayal in gang culture, punishable by death in most organizations. But David wasn't just any member. He was my younger cousin, someone I had recruited into the set myself, someone I had mentored and protected throughout his time in the organization. The leaders knew about our relationship when they gave me the assignment, and that was exactly why they chose me to handle it. They wanted to test my loyalty, to see if I would put the set above family, duty above love. They also wanted to send a message to every other member about what happened to people who betrayed the organization. Even the enforcer's own family wasn't safe from consequences. I was given 48 hours to find David and handle the situation permanently. The word permanently left no room for interpretation. This wasn't a disciplinary beating. This was an execution order. Finding David wasn't difficult. I knew all his hiding spots, his habits, his friends and family members who might shelter him. What was difficult was accepting that I was being asked to kill someone I loved, someone whose only crime might have been trying to avoid a long prison sentence by providing information that probably wasn't even valuable to law enforcement. I spent 2 days wrestling with the decision, knowing that refusing the assignment would mean my own death, but unable to imagine actually pulling the trigger on my own cousin. I tried to find alternatives, convincing David to leave town, staging his death, finding evidence that he wasn't actually cooperating with police. But the leaders had made their decision, and they were watching me carefully to see how I would handle the ultimate test of loyalty. On the second night, I found David hiding in an abandoned building in our old neighborhood, scared and desperate, knowing that someone would be coming for him soon. When he saw me, his face showed a mixture of relief and terror. Relief that it was family who had found him. Terror that family might be the one to kill him. That moment, looking into the eyes of someone I had sworn to protect, someone whose life was in my hands, I finally understood what I had become and what I had to do to reclaim my humanity. Instead of carrying out the execution, I made a decision that would change both of our lives forever. I told David to run, gave him money and a gun, and helped him escape from the city that night. I knew that this decision would mark me as a traitor to the set, that I would become a target for the same kind of violence I had inflicted on others for 12 years. But I also knew that I couldn't live with myself if I killed my own cousin to prove my loyalty to an organization that saw us both as expendable. That night, as I watched David disappear into the darkness, I realized that my time as an enforcer was over. I had finally found something more important than the respect and fear that had defined my identity for over a decade. I had found my conscience, and it was telling me that no organization was worth betraying your own family. The next morning, I would have to face the consequences of my decision, but for the first time in years, I felt like I had done something right. The weight of 12 years of violence and brutality was still on my shoulders, but at least I hadn't added my cousin's blood to that burden. The aftermath of my decision was swift and brutal. Within hours of David's escape, the leaders knew that I had disobeyed orders and helped a traitor avoid justice. My status as enforcer was immediately revoked, and I became a target for the same organization I had served faithfully for 12 years. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who had been the instrument of the set's discipline was now subject to that same discipline, and everyone knew that the punishment for my betrayal would be death. I had maybe 24 hours before they sent someone to kill me, and I used that time to get my affairs in order and prepare for either escape or death. The hardest part wasn't facing my own mortality. It was realizing how completely I had isolated myself during my years as enforcer. I had no real friends to turn to, no allies who would risk their own lives to help me, no one who cared enough about me as a person to offer shelter or assistance. The respect I had commanded was revealed to be nothing more than fear, and fear disappears the moment you lose the power to enforce it. I was completely alone, facing death at the hands of people I had considered brothers, and there was no one in the world who would mourn my passing or remember me as anything other than a monster. The escape from Los Angeles was the most terrifying experience of my life. I knew that the Inglewood family bloods had connections throughout Southern California, that they could reach me anywhere within their sphere of influence. I also knew that my reputation as an enforcer made me recognizable to gang members from other sets, some of whom might want to collect the bounty that had undoubtedly been placed on my head. I had to get far away, change my identity, and start over in a place where no one knew my history or my face. The process took months of careful planning, false identities, and help from people who specialized in helping former gang members disappear. I ended up in a small town in Northern California, working construction under an assumed name, trying to build a new life while constantly looking over my shoulder for signs that my past had caught up with me. The paranoia was constant and exhausting. Every stranger could be an assassin. Every phone call could be a death threat. Every knock on the door could be my final moment. But slowly, gradually, I began to realize that I was free from the prison I'd built for myself during my years as an enforcer. For the first time in over a decade, I could make decisions based on what was right rather than what was expected, could form relationships based on trust rather than fear, could look at myself in the mirror without seeing a monster staring back. The process of rebuilding my humanity after 12 years as an enforcer was the most difficult thing I had ever attempted. I had to learn how to feel empathy again, how to form genuine relationships, how to trust people and allow them to trust me. The guilt over what I had done to my own brothers was overwhelming. Hundreds of people had suffered because of my actions. Families had been torn apart. Lives had been destroyed. I started attending therapy, something that would have been unthinkable during my time in the gang, and slowly began to understand the psychological damage that had been done to me and that I had done to others. The therapist helped me understand that I had been a victim as well as a perpetrator, that the organization had deliberately shaped me into a weapon and then used that weapon against my own community. This didn't excuse what I had done, but it helped me understand how I had become the person I was and how I could work to become someone better. The healing process took years and required me to confront every act of violence I had committed, every person I had hurt, every family I had damaged in service of an organization that saw me as nothing more than a tool. 5 years after leaving Los Angeles, I made a decision that terrified me but felt necessary for my continued healing. I decided to return and try to make amends for what I had done. I knew that going back was dangerous, that there might still be people looking for me, but I also knew that I couldn't truly move forward without facing my past and trying to repair some of the damage I had caused. I reached out through intermediaries to some of the people I had hurt during my time as enforcer, offering to meet with them, to apologize, to provide whatever assistance I could in their healing process. Some of them wanted nothing to do with me, and I understood that completely. Others were willing to listen, and those conversations were some of the most difficult and meaningful of my life. I learned about the long-term effects of the violence I had inflicted: physical disabilities, psychological trauma, broken families, destroyed dreams. But I also learned about the incredible resilience of the human spirit, the capacity for forgiveness, and the possibility of redemption even after the most terrible actions. Not everyone forgave me, and I didn't expect them to, but some of them were willing to work with me to prevent other young people from following the same destructive path. The work I do now focuses on helping young people understand the reality of gang life before they get too deep to escape. I speak at schools, community centers, and juvenile detention facilities about my experience as an enforcer, about the psychological toll of violence, about the isolation and emptiness that comes with being feared rather than loved. The message is always the same. The respect that gangs promise is an illusion. The brotherhood they offer is conditional, and the power they provide comes at the cost of your humanity. I tell them about the hundreds of people I hurt in the name of loyalty, about the 12 years I spent as a weapon for other people's agendas, about the night I finally chose family over organization and had to flee for my life. Some of them listen, some of them don't, but I keep telling the story because I know that if it prevents even one young person from becoming what I became, if it saves even one family from the kind of violence I inflicted, then all the pain and risk of sharing my story will have been worth it. The work is dangerous because it requires me to maintain some connection to the gang world, but it's also the most meaningful thing I've ever done with my life. The hardest part of my story to share is the impact that my actions had on the families of the people I hurt. During my 12 years as an enforcer, I didn't just hurt individuals. I traumatized entire families, destroyed relationships, and created cycles of fear and violence that affected multiple generations. Children grew up afraid of their own fathers because they had witnessed them being brutalized by the enforcer. Wives left their husbands because they couldn't handle the stress of living with someone who was constantly under threat of violence. Parents buried sons who died from injuries I inflicted, or who were killed in retaliations that my actions triggered. The ripple effects of enforcer violence extend far beyond the immediate victim, creating trauma and dysfunction that can last for decades. I carry the weight of all that damage, all those broken families, all those destroyed lives. It's a burden that I will carry for the rest of my life, and it should be. The people I hurt deserve to have their pain acknowledged, their suffering recognized, and their trauma validated. I can't undo what I did, but I can work to ensure that other families don't experience the same devastation that my actions caused. One of the most important lessons I learned during my recovery is that the gang system is designed to create people like me, enforcers who will hurt their own people in service of abstract concepts like loyalty and respect. The organization deliberately identifies young men who are capable of violence, trains them to suppress their empathy, and then uses them as weapons against their own community. It's a form of psychological warfare that turns victims into perpetrators, that makes oppressed people complicit in their own oppression. Understanding this helped me realize that I wasn't uniquely evil or inherently violent. I was a product of a system that was designed to create monsters. This doesn't excuse my actions, but it helps explain how someone who joined a gang looking for brotherhood and protection could end up becoming the person that his own brothers feared most. The gang system is brilliant in its cruelty, using the best impulses of young people, their desire for belonging, their willingness to sacrifice for others, their need for purpose and meaning, and twisting those impulses into tools of destruction. Breaking free from that system requires understanding how it works and making a conscious choice to reject its values and methods. The relationship between enforcers and the communities they operate in is complex and often misunderstood. From the outside, it might seem like enforcers are simply criminals who hurt innocent people for money or power. But the reality is more complicated. Enforcers often see themselves as protectors of their community, as people who maintain order and justice in neighborhoods that have been abandoned by legitimate law enforcement. I genuinely believed that I was serving my community by disciplining people who stole, who showed cowardice, who violated the codes that kept our organization functioning. I thought I was preventing larger conflicts by handling smaller problems quickly and decisively. It took years for me to understand that I wasn't protecting my community. I was terrorizing it, creating a climate of fear that made everyone less safe, not more. The justice I thought I was dispensing was really just violence disguised as righteousness, and the order I was maintaining was really just oppression disguised as leadership. Real community protection comes from building people up, not tearing them down, from creating opportunities for growth and development, not from punishing people for their mistakes and weaknesses. The psychological profile of someone who can serve as an enforcer for 12 years is something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about during my recovery. It requires a specific combination of traits: the ability to compartmentalize emotions, the willingness to use violence against people you care about, the capacity to maintain loyalty to abstract principles even when they conflict with human relationships. But it also requires a fundamental misunderstanding of what strength and leadership actually mean. I thought that being feared made me powerful, that being willing to hurt people made me strong, that being loyal to the organization above all else made me a good soldier. I was wrong on all counts. Real strength comes from the ability to show mercy. Real power comes from the capacity to build rather than destroy. And real loyalty is to people and principles, not to organizations that exploit and manipulate. The enforcer mentality is built on a foundation of toxic masculinity, emotional suppression, and a complete misunderstanding of what it means to be a protector. Breaking free from that mentality required me to completely rebuild my understanding of strength, power, and loyalty from the ground up. The impact of social media and modern technology on gang enforcement has changed dramatically since my time in the role. When I was an enforcer, our activities were largely invisible to the outside world. We operated in shadows, our victims were afraid to report what happened to them, and the broader community often didn't know the extent of internal gang violence. Today, everything is documented, shared, and broadcast in real time. Young enforcers post videos of their activities on social media. Victims have more ways to reach out for help, and law enforcement has better tools for monitoring and prosecuting gang violence. This has made the enforcer role more dangerous and less effective, but it has also made it more visible to young people who might be considering that path. They can see the reality of what enforcers actually do, the consequences they face, and the isolation they experience. This visibility is both a blessing and a curse. It makes it harder for gangs to romanticize the enforcer role, but it also makes it easier for them to recruit young people who are attracted to the notoriety and fear that comes with being known as someone who will hurt their own people. The key is helping young people understand that the temporary power and respect that comes with being an enforcer is not worth the lifetime of consequences that follow. The legal consequences of being a gang enforcer are severe and long-lasting, something that I was fortunate enough to avoid, but that many others have not. Enforcers are often charged under RICO statutes, gang enhancement laws, and conspiracy charges that can result in life sentences even for relatively minor acts of violence. The legal system treats enforcers as key figures in criminal organizations, and prosecutors use their cases to send messages about the consequences of gang involvement. But the legal consequences are often less severe than the personal consequences: the isolation, the paranoia, the guilt, the constant fear of retaliation. I know former enforcers who are serving life sentences and others who are free but completely broken by what they did during their time in the role. The job destroys people from the inside out, and very few people who serve as enforcers for extended periods are able to maintain their mental health, their relationships, or their connection to their own humanity. The legal system can punish enforcers for their crimes, but it can't heal the psychological damage that the role inflicts on both the perpetrator and the victims. That healing has to come from within, and it requires a level of self-awareness and commitment to change that many people are never able to achieve. The process of leaving the enforcer role and transitioning to legitimate life is incredibly difficult and dangerous. Unlike other gang members who might be able to gradually reduce their involvement or move to different cities, enforcers are too valuable and too dangerous to be allowed to simply walk away. They know too much about the organization's internal operations, they have too much power and influence, and they represent too much of a threat if they decide to cooperate with law enforcement. Most enforcers who try to leave the role end up dead, either killed by their own organization or by enemies who see their departure as an opportunity for revenge. Those who do manage to escape often have to completely disappear, changing their identities and cutting all ties to their previous lives. The transition requires extensive support from law enforcement, social services, and community organizations, but those resources are often not available or not adequate to meet the complex needs of former enforcers. The result is that many people who want to leave the role feel trapped, unable to continue, but unable to escape, caught in a prison of their own making with no clear path to freedom. Before I finish my story, I need something from you. If this video has impacted you in any way, if it's made you think differently about gang life, about the reality of internal gang violence, about the psychological cost of being feared rather than loved, I need you to share it. Hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and most importantly, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe it's a young person in your family who's attracted to the power and respect that gangs seem to offer. Maybe it's a parent who's trying to understand what their child might be getting involved in. Maybe it's a community leader who's looking for ways to address gang violence from the inside out. Your share could save someone from becoming what I became. Your comment could reach someone who's currently serving as an enforcer and looking for a way out. Your engagement helps this message reach more people who need to understand that the respect gangs promise is an illusion, that the power they offer comes at the cost of your humanity, and that there are always alternatives to violence and fear. I also want to hear from you in the comments. Tell me your thoughts, your experiences, your questions, whether you agree with everything I've said or not, whether my story resonates with you or challenges you. I want to know. This conversation doesn't end when the video stops. It continues in the comments, in the discussions you have with your families, in the choices you make when faced with pressure to hurt others in the name of loyalty or respect. So please, take a moment right now to engage with this content. Your voice matters, your story matters, and together we can create change that prevents other young people from following the same destructive path. Share your own experiences with violence and healing. Tell me about times when you chose mercy over cruelty, or ask questions about how to help someone who might be trapped in a similar situation. The more we talk about these issues openly and honestly, the more we can help each other make better choices. To anyone watching this who is currently serving as an enforcer or who is being pressured to take on that role, I want you to know that you have more power than you realize. You have the power to choose differently, to refuse assignments that violate your conscience, to find ways to protect people rather than hurt them. It won't be easy, and it will require more courage than any act of violence you've ever committed, but it is possible. You are not condemned to be a weapon for other people's agendas forever. You are not defined by the worst things you've been asked to do. You are not too far gone to change direction and reclaim your humanity. I was an enforcer for 12 years, responsible for hundreds of acts of violence against my own people, and I was able to find a way out when I finally chose family over organization, love over fear, conscience over loyalty. If I can make that choice, if I can find the courage to walk away from everything I thought defined me, then so can you. The first step is believing that you deserve better than a life built on fear and violence. The second step is reaching out for help. There are people waiting to support you, communities ready to embrace you, and opportunities available that you might not even know exist. My name is Marcus, and for 12 years I was the enforcer for the INGLEWOOD family bloods, the man who hurt his own brothers in the name of loyalty and respect. Today, I choose to be known as someone who walked away from that role, who chose family over organization, who believes in the power of mercy and redemption. This is my story, my confession, and my warning. The respect that comes from fear is not real respect. It's just terror wearing a mask. The loyalty that requires you to hurt people you care about is not real loyalty. It's just manipulation disguised as brotherhood. The power that comes from violence is not real power. It's just weakness pretending to be strength. But there is hope. There are alternatives. And there is help available for anyone brave enough to choose love over fear. If this video has impacted you, please don't just watch and move on. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Leave a comment telling me your thoughts, your story, or your questions. Your engagement helps this message reach more people, and your voice adds to the conversation that can save lives. Remember, every choice you make matters. Every act of mercy or cruelty shapes your soul, and every person has the power to choose healing over harm. Thank you for listening, thank you for caring, and thank you for being part of the solution. Stay strong, choose mercy, and never let fear control your decisions.